Hello there. It's so nice to have you here today. This is a special one. I'm not doing book reviews. Instead, I am giving you a list of favorites. These are specifically fiction books that I read as an adult. This is going to be my top 20. I didn't really put them in a specific order. Parts of them are, but parts of them are not. They're kind of scattered depending like, okay, these are like the lesser ones and these are the higher ones. Let's start with Free to Fall. I read this when I was reading a lot of YA books at the time, and this one I was like, okay, it's a little sci-fi like, but this book is about a young girl who's 16 years old. Her name is Rory. Her name is really Aurora, but they call her Rory. She goes to this private school. Her mom went there, and she has this best friend who has something called the doubt. And it's something that people look down upon because they're listening within themselves, and you're not really supposed to do that. Instead, they go to their Lux to tell them everything. It's kind of like a tablet that just makes decisions for them and it helps them think through things. But she's always consulting her Lux. But when she goes to the school, she's not going to have her best friend with her anymore. However, she does meet this one young man who doesn't like Lux at all, doesn't even go to a Lux. And so now she's starting to learn a little bit about what that might be like, and she gets herself into some trouble because of this guy. But you know what I really love about this book? It is very plot heavy. There are so many well planned out details throughout this book, and I didn't know what was going to happen while reading this. Like, this is interesting and I wanted to keep knowing. But yeah, definitely loved this book. Wonderland Creek. This is a Christian historical fiction set in the Appalachian Mountains, which I read a lot of these after this. This was probably my first one that I had read about that topic. You know, when people would maybe go and bring their books to the people in the mountains to try to teach them how to read, things like that. This is about a girl named Alice. She has 5 crates of books that she wants to bring into the mountains to try to help the people there. I remember being a little annoyed by this lead character when I started reading this. And there are a lot of questions that started to rush through my mind, but she pushes people away because she always just wants to read and she does not want to have an actual connection with anyone. Once she gets to these mountains, she is just thrown into adventure, and it's something that she only read about in books, but now she's living it. The book 13 Reasons Why. I know this one is a little bit controversial, and there was a mini-series TV show that was made after I had read the book already. But this book, if you read it not watching anything, not knowing anything like I did, it was really emotional. This is about a young man named Clay Jensen. He gets a whole bunch of tapes. They're cassette tapes. So he's listening to them one by one, and they tell a story. And these are tapes specifically about Hannah. Now, Hannah has died, and we know that. Clay is a little sad about that. So while he gets this package and he hears Hannah's voice, he is in shock. And he had a crush on her, so that makes it even harder for him. So he wants to know what led to her death. Each tape is a story about someone that they know from the school that they attend. So Hannah is telling a story about each person, and he sees his own name on one of the tapes, and he is like, what? I had nothing to do with Hannah's death. And what I love about this book is that there is no way to fix what happened to Hannah. So your heart breaks while you read this book. There is some sexual content in this, and there were a couple bad words in this, just so you guys know. But I just remember loving this book. I could not put it down. I gave this 5 stars. I really love this book. And even though I haven't read it in several years, it still sticks with me a lot. The Lark is so cute. These are about 2 cousins. They start living in this place. They don't have any money really. It's a guest house. They decide they want to sell flowers and leave their boarding house. And then they meet people while they're running this guest house, make connections with people. They start to find love. Even though it's not really a happy reason why they're there, they try to make the best out of every situation. And you know, this is called The Lark, so you know there's going to be humor, like, oh, that was such a lark. There was something that even came up in the beginning portion of the book that they tie with a bow at the end, and I love that. This is just such a cozy read. The Blue Castle. Now, I read this just this year. This was so amazing. I'm not going to talk in full about what it is, but it's about this young woman who's been living underneath her family's rule for her whole life, and she's getting close to 30, and she just realizes she has not lived any life without people controlling her, and she needs to get away, and she does. It's such a fun and amazing story because you feel for her the entire time, and you really don't like her family as you learn about how they treat her, but then you see how kind and wonderful she is. I love the story. I love the love story in it. It is so cute. Candle in the Darkness. Now, this book is a series. It's probably the only one from this list that is a series, and I love the whole series, but this book in particular I really, really love. It's set in the Civil War period, and this woman, she wants to stand up for God's kingdom. She does not want to see slavery. She starts to see the racism and wants abolition around. Her name is Caroline. She starts to just write things about her life in Virginia. Now, she's not a slave. She's witnessed it, but she starts to learn about the accounts of slavery around her. Her parents own slaves, but she just hates what happens to them. And I know she probably lives in fear because of this. The slaves around her are actually more like family than her actual family to her. She loves them. So she has to decide whether she wants to obey the portion of her country or if she wants to obey God. And so she's starting to learn like maybe she can risk her life for the sake of helping others. This one I gave 5 stars. The second book I gave 3 stars, and the third book I gave 4 stars. So that just shows you how much I love them in order. The first one just amazing. Emma. I found this to be a hilarious book. I don't know. I just felt like Emma, she's trying her best to kind of be a matchmaker all the time, but she completely is ignoring clues about her own love life. She is so ignorant. It's just the characters are so much fun. And it shows you how dumb we can be sometimes. Like, wow, why didn't I see that? But she does stick her nose in a lot of people's business too. So that's a little messed up. I found this to be so fun. I'm not going to talk a lot about this because it's a classic. A lot of people know what it's about. Some Kind of Happiness I read a couple years ago, and this is like a middle grade book, but it was so brilliant. I gave this 5 stars. It was so imaginative. It was so compelling. This is about a young girl who's sent to her grandparents' house for the summer, but she has no idea who they are. She has never actually met them. So this is her first time as she meets all her cousins, and she's like, what in the world? Why are all my cousins here? They all kind of live there. So the main character's name is Finley, and she creates her own world. She goes outside into the woods, and she has what is called Everwood. And she gets her cousins on board to have this imaginary story that she makes. And she knows that there's tension in her family, especially from her side of the family. And she knows there's a part of the woods that she's not allowed to go into, and she doesn't understand why. She also knows she's not supposed to talk to a certain family called the Baileys. So there's rivalry. So this is her discovering mysteries of her own family while also having her own creativity and dealing with her own issues. There's so much adventure and whimsy in this. And I know probably a lot of people have not heard of this book, and they really should read it. It is very good. Jane Eyre. This I read about 3 years ago, specifically because my late best friend, she read this every single year, and she always raved about it to me. And I had seen movie versions. She was always like, you have to read the book. You have to read the book. So after she passed away, I decided I am going to read a bunch of books that she loved. And this was one of them. And then I felt horrible that I didn't read it when she was alive still so we could talk about it. But this was one of her very favorite books, and I love it. I love it. So Jane is an orphan raised by her uncle in his house, but now he has passed away. So because his wife didn't like Jane at all, she has to leave. Like, she wants nothing to do with her. Eventually, she becomes a governess, and she ends up working for a man who people don't seem to really like too much. He's got some mysterious background, but he often wants her company, and sometimes he doesn't. And it's very weird, the relationship that they have. It's very strange. This is a dark romance. It's really unique. Jane is so caring, and she cares more for doing what's right. She is one of the sweetest ladies in literature, in my opinion. And I learned so much of her character and how maybe I should live. The writing in this is so good. Wow. Stunning. Very well written. That brings us to Pride and Prejudice. This obviously is another Jane Austen book. It is so very loved. I love it too. I didn't read this until 2022. I know, it's so sad. I was missing out, and there were so many people saying, oh, you should read it, you should read it, you should read it. And I think because everyone was like, you should read it, I was like, yeah, I'll read it one day. I had already known what the story was about. I watched every version of TV show, movie, and so I felt like I didn't really need to read the book. When I read the book, I was like, I should have read the book. So yes, I'm a late bloomer, but Pride and Prejudice, the writing is amazing. The storyline is, I just want Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy to talk better. I feel like the communication barriers, they're just not good sometimes. And I'm like, oh my word. But books are just not written this good anymore. And so many people try to take these books and try to recreate them, and I don't like that because this is perfect. Where the Mountain Meets the Moon. This one, I got this for my boys when they were younger. This one also has a sequel that I read that was good. Maybe there were 2 sequels, definitely one. And it's based off of like a folklore from China. I was just addicted to this book. I wanted to keep reading it, and my boys, they loved it. They couldn't wait for me to read more of it too. So this is about Minley, and her mom, she lives in poverty, and her mom just hates it. She hates living in poverty. She wants to talk to the old man of the moon, and he's found at the never-ending mountain, but she lives on the fruitless mountain. They work very, very hard there. I feel like this kind of sounds a little bit like The Wizard of Oz, which I read the entire thing of. All like 15 books of The Wizard of Oz. Has a tiny bit of touch to that, but it's also its own unique version. Minley, she meets lots of creatures. Lots of things go on, lots of obstacles she has to take. She has goals that she sets. It's just a great fairy tale. But to hear my son say, read another chapter after like starting to read this was just so nice. There are some illustrations in this book that are really gorgeous too. A Little Princess. I don't know if you ever noticed, but in my intro, I have like a stack of books and A Little Princess is one of them. This book, I grew up on the movie versions. There are like 3 movie versions. There was an 80s one that I saw. There was the Shirley Temple one that I grew up on from a young child. And then there was the one that came out in the 90s that I saw in theaters. And I really loved all of them. So I just was so into this story. But I hadn't read the book in my childhood, which is ridiculous. I should have. But I read it as a grown woman and I absolutely adore it. The writing is so good. I just felt little connections to Sarah in a way, and you just feel for her because she grows up with her father. He brings her to a boarding house. She's treated like a princess because she has everything. He is a captain. Something happens where they believe he is dead and she therefore has to live as a maid and she's not treated well. But she decides that she wants to live like a princess no matter her circumstances. And I love that she tries to see herself as someone worthy, even when she feels worthless at times. I wanted to, like, if I read this as a child, it would have made me want to act like her, to be able to see things in a beauty, to see things in a way that made me treasure myself better. The Wolf Wilder. This is an interesting book because it is a middle grade book as well. And I was reading this to my 2 sons when they were much younger as well. And we were all hooked again. So I was teaching lessons on Russia to my sons, and this was just a book that had come up at one point of something that maybe would be good to read to them. Wilding was an actual thing in the Soviet Union, and it's how they viewed and treated wolves. This young girl, she is being raised with her mother who wilds these wolves. So these were like pets that people kept, them a very important status thing. So her mom is training them. So this is set when the Tsar is trying to control and take advantage of people in the surrounding areas, and they threaten her mother because of what their job is. So there's a revolution that's about to start, and so the young girl goes out trying to survive. There's a lot of violence in this, which was kind of surprising. So I think this is better for preteens and teens, which my sons had just like been around that age when I read it to them. But adults really could get a lot from this. You get some history, but you also get an idea of something that I had never heard about. And she has a pet wolf. If you like stories about like pets and stuff, she has a wolf. She basically has to learn how to survive like a wolf with her wolf because her mother gets taken away. This is an amazing book. I gave this 5 stars. It's just so good. The way it's written, go read it. I mean it. Mary Barton, I just read this a few years ago. I cried at the end of the book. Oh my. It's an emotional one. There was just a very moving scene. So Mary grows up with her father, and there are a lot of problems that happen, but she is such a wonderful person. Her father is so happy to be her father. But now she is a grown woman and guys are starting to fall for her. But she's a dressmaker. She wants to focus on just doing the best she can and to help her father too. So she's a Victorian working class woman. There is a murder that happens. A whole bunch of sad things like chain react because of it. This tells a side of the Victorian times that a lot of people don't want to hear about. It was very compelling. It was written so well. Heidi is a book that I always wanted to read as a child. In fact, I started reading the sequel when I was I stayed with my mom's friends briefly for a few days in Pennsylvania, and they had the book, the sequel, so I started reading that, and I was like, I should read the first one, but I never got my hands on it. Again, I grew up with the Shirley Temple version of Heidi, which is still one of probably my favorite Christmas movie of all time. So I always wanted to read this, and I only read this a couple years ago. So if you don't know the story of Heidi, it's very, very famous. Young girl goes to live with her grandfather in the Swiss Alps. Her aunt brings her there, abandons her, that kind of thing. There's something that happens that leads her to Frankfurt, Germany, where she has to help with this young girl who is in a wheelchair. But the whole time she misses her grandfather. Okay, so that's the premise of it, but there is a lot after that you would have to learn about as you read the book. Basically, Heidi makes friends with like everyone. She just shows love to all, even though there are some wretched people out there. There are so many values taught in this, and it's just really fun. Absolutely love this one. Before I fall. I read this so long ago, but I don't know if you guys know the story of like Run Lola Run. It was a movie from the late 90s that I just loved. It was a German movie. But there's also Groundhog Day, you know, where you have to like relive something over and over again. But before I Fall, this is about a girl explaining how she dies. She wakes up on her last day and has to start all over again. So she's in a loop. She needs to know why she keeps reliving this day. I was told about this book by two people. One couldn't even finish it because they were just angry. The other one said that they actually went to a convention. The author told them that you're not supposed to like the main character. It's one of those. But when I read this, I felt compassion for the main character instead. I think that really helped me like this book so much because it just brought on a lot of emotion. There is some sexual stuff and language in this though. I didn't like that because it's a little shallow, but it did remind me a lot of my own high school experiences of my friendships and people that I knew from that time, but it was really well written. Samantha, she dies in a car crash. She is one of the most popular girls in school, as are her friends. And they just teased a whole lot of people. They don't like them. So then she starts to learn that the people that are weirdos are genuine and really nice people. So it's pretty powerful. For sure. I really liked this. Little Women. Can you believe I did not read this in my childhood? Again, I had watched every single version of Little Women you could think of. I watched the 40s versions movies and the 50s version movie. I watched the 90s movie. I mean, after I read this book, I watched the newer version because I read the book before that came out. But then there are also all the TV versions, the miniseries versions. There are even newer miniseries versions. There are modern day tellings of this too that I've seen movies for, and I've seen a Korean version of this, but it's nothing like it, of course. It was just they took the name, but I was like, oh, let me watch it because it says Little Women. Anyway, anything Little Women, I go crazy over. I absolutely adore this story. It is one of my favorite books of all time forever. The words are captivating. The feelings are so expressive. And I loved Mrs. March's speeches throughout this. Like, she gives them and they're amazing. As a mother, I'm like, that's a good one. But she actually doesn't say a lot. But when she did, it was like to the point. Well taken. She was so well respected by her children. So I don't have to explain what this is about because pretty much everyone that's going to watch this probably has read the book or knows of the story or has seen movies of it. But this is about a family of sisters growing up around the time of Civil War. They live in the North in Massachusetts. Their father is away and their mother is doing their best to raise them as they are young. Oh, but it's so great. Okay, The Samurai's Garden. This book, I am so happy I found out about this book and that I read it. I have mentioned the author a couple times because even this year I read one of her books. But The Samurai's Garden, this is set in the late 1930s in Japan. But this is about Stephen. He was born in Hong Kong, but he goes to his grandfather's village in Japan. But his grandfather's house is in this remote village. There is war between Japan and China. So again, because he is Chinese himself, this causes a little bit of issues here. And he has an illness. And there's also a servant that lives in the house and tries to take care of him here and there. But this is about how he views his servant like the servant is a samurai. And his name is Matsu. So they form this bond of friendship together. And they even go to this leper colony every once in a while. And they meet a woman named Sachi there. And so then there's stories all about gardening. He starts to find some passions and he learns about other people's passions and how to tend a garden during a time of war. And it is really an engaging story. It's filled with heart. And this was, again, one of the best books I've ever read in my life. So a lot of people probably haven't heard of this book, but you should read it. I mean it. It's so good. Uncle Tom's Cabin. This has become one of my very, 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 very favorite books ever. I don't know why I didn't read this sooner, but in a way it's good I didn't. I read this years ago now though. There are lots of characters in this, and Uncle Tom, of course, he is a man who has been born and lived in slavery his whole life, and he has become a very old man. And he has this faith and passion for God throughout this book. And he wants to live according to God's word throughout it, no matter what, no matter how hated he might be and how ill-treated he is. He does not want to hate anyone. This book has so many great things. You learn about the lives of these different characters that he interacts with. This book started a revolution where so many people were learning about how slaves were actually treated, that it's part of what caused people to want abolition. It's that thought-provoking. So while you will read there's a lot of racism in this, but the way that it's all depicted shows the horridness of that. And this shows that we are all made in the image of God. We have value. And number one, this is number one for me, okay? The Neverending Story, which I'm about to read to my sons. We told my husband and I both said to them, you need to read this book. And one of them started it, but then he just didn't continue. We're like, well, I'm gonna just read it to you then, because you need to know this story. And I know a lot of people know the movies. There's The Neverending Story and Neverending Story 2, the one from the 80s and the one from the early 90s. Basically, both those movies are all in this book. The book is incredible. So we learn about Bastian. He's doing his best to live without his mother who had died, and his father is doing his best to raise him. He ends up going to school. He is made fun of a lot. He is bullied, ridiculed. He goes and he starts reading this book that he got from a bookstore. So Bastian, he starts to read this book and he becomes a part of the story. And this book brings him to a place called Fantastica. Not Fantasia like in the movies, Fantastica. And in Fantastica, he meets friends that he starts to form these bonds while reading, and he just becomes so connected. And it gets to the point where he becomes so into this book that he really does become a part of it, and he has to help Fantastica in a lot of ways. So it's definitely a fantasy adventure. It is incredible. This is translated from German, but anyway, this is my favorite fiction book that I read as an adult. Yeah, and I feel like everyone really, anyone that likes fantasy books should read this book. Okay, so there were a few books that were not included that I'm going to give just a little recommendation where they didn't make the top 20, but they are close enough. Convenience Store Woman would be one. It's very funny. This is a woman who thinks she had been reborn as a convenience store woman, like that. It was her purpose. So her life is just completely into her job. That's all she thinks about. As she has friends that, they're all having babies, they're getting married, all these things. And so people are pressuring her to do the same, but she's like, but I have my purpose here. But there's a new worker that comes in, and so that changes things a little bit for her. The only one left. I read this last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago now. Kit, she works as a caretaker and she has to go to this one area as a caretaker because she was suspended. So Lenora is who she decides to care for. She's an old woman. Now, she had been thought of as a murderer because this old woman, she's the only survivor from her entire family being murdered. So now Kit, she has to care for her. So she's a little like, I don't know, this old lady, she can't do anything to me. The old lady doesn't really talk. So she's like, okay, well, she doesn't talk and she can't really hurt me, right? But she finds out a whole mystery that unravels. Ooh, it's good. There were some loops in this too. These things I've done. This one actually should probably have replaced one other book this should have been on the top 20. If I could switch one out, this one honestly should be on there. This is about Dara. We learn about her sophomore year and her senior year, and it's back and forth between those. She had a best friend named Aubrey, and she passed away. And it was not in a fun way. It was horrible. And so she is trying her best to remember all that she can of that time. So you get to learn about what her life used to be like and what her life is now because of dealing with the grief. But there's also Aubrey's brother, Ethan, in this story, and he's dealing with the loss in his own way too. I felt it was really good. So I'll just leave it there with the 3 extras for you guys. So really that was my top 23. I'd love to know your thoughts on some of these books. Maybe you didn't even like them ever, and you're like, I'm surprised you liked that. I hated it, and that's fine too. Have a great rest of your week and enjoy your reading. Make some favorites. I hope to make more. Bye.